I'm a human rights lawyer, and I'm applying the law to defend people and human dignity for many years. I have often heard that freedom or human dignity are very important, but economic benefits, security issues, or geopolitical interests are even more significant. The fault of this approach is that freedom and peace are inextricably linked. The state that grossly violates human rights, killing journalists, jailed activists, disperse peaceful demonstrations, such states provide threats not just for their own citizens, but to the peace and security in general. And that is why when politicians base their political decisions only on economic benefits, security issues, or geopolitical interests, and negating human rights and freedom, even if they benefit in the short term, we are all awaiting a catastrophe in the long term. And Russia is a bright example. Because Russia, for decades, liquidated their own civil society step by step. But for a long time, the civilized world turned their blind eye to this. They continue to shake Putin's hand, they build gas pipeline, they do business as usual. The world scarcely blinked even to the annexation of Crimea, which was unprecedented in post-war Europe. And now, as a human rights lawyer, I found myself in a situation when the law doesn't work. Russian troops are deliberately shelling residential buildings, schools, churches, museums, and hospitals. They're attacking evacuation corridors. They're torturing people in filtration camps. They forcibly taking Ukrainian children to Russia. They ban Ukrainian language and culture. They're abducting, robbing, raping, and killing civilians in the occupied territories. And entire UN system of peace and security can't stop this. This war turns people into the numbers. We are returning people their names. That is what we are literally doing. Because people are not numbers, and life of every person matters. Let me share with you one story from our database. This is a story of 10-year-old boy Ilya Matviychuk from Mariupol. When Russia tried to siege the city, they didn't allow the International Committee of Red Cross to open Green Corridor and to evacuate civilians. Hence, Ilya and his mother, like other people in Mariupol, have to hide in the basement of their building from the Russian shelling. They melted snow to have water, and they made fires to cook at least some food. But when supplies ran out, they were forced to go out, and suddenly they appeared in the center of Russian shelling. Ilya's mother was hitting her head, and the boy's leg was torn. With the last strength, his mother took her son to the front apartment. It was no medical assistance, because prior to this, Russians deliberately destroyed maternity hospital and entire medical infrastructure in Mariupol. So in this front apartment, they were laid down on a couch and just hugged each other. They were lying like this for several hours. And this 10-year-old boy, Ilya, told to my colleague that his mother died and got frozen right in his arms. As the human rights lawyer, I have a question. How we people who live in 21st century will defend human beings, their lives, their freedom, and their human dignity? Can we rely on the law, or does just brutal force matter? The answer to this question is important not just only for people in Ukraine, and not only for people in Iran, in Sudan, in Nicaragua, or Venezuela. The answer to this question will define our common future, because we are losing freedom in the world. Last year, half of the population in the world went to the election, but don't be naive, because 80% of people in the world live in non-free or partially free societies. It means that the people who have a real right to vote, for whom they want to vote, are the minority. The problem is not only in that fact that in authoritarian countries, the space for freedom is shrinking to the size of the prison cell. The problem is that even in developed democracies, people start to put into question the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And there are reasons for this, because current generations, they inherited their freedom from their parents. They have never fought for it. They became consumers of democracy. They start to take human rights for granted. They consider freedom as a possibility to make a choice between different cheeses in supermarket. In addition to this, we have witnessed the rapid boost of new technologies, and people start to spend more and more time in digital reality. But digital reality is overloaded with fake and disinformation. And people become very vulnerable to external manipulations. And now we have a situation that people start to lose their ability to distinguish between lie and truth. And now we have a situation that even in small communities, people have no more shared reality. But without shared reality, we have no more common actions. Without common actions, we can lose our democracy. First, we live in very turbulent times. I don't know how historians in future will call this historical period, but the world order, which is based on UN Charter and international law, is collapsing before our eyes. The work of Security Council is paralyzed. Now it's very easy to predict that such kinds of fires like wars will emerge more and more often in different parts of the globe, because the entire international environment is faulty and sparks are everywhere. We have to start a cardinal reform of this system. This system doesn't protect people from authoritarianism and the wars. This system was created in the past century by victorious countries who ingrained for themselves irrational privileges. Now it's stalling. It's reproducing ritualistic movements. And this Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, it's also the huge sign that the world order collapsed. Because this is not just a war between two states. This is a war between two systems, authoritarianism and democracy. And with this war, Putin attempts to convince the entire world that freedom, democracy, human rights are fake values, because they couldn't protect anyone during the war. Putin attempts to convince that country with a strong military potential and nuclear weapon can break international order, can dictate its rules to entire international community, and even forcibly change the internationally recognized borders. And if Putin succeeds, it will encourage other authoritarian leaders in different parts of the globe to do the same. Second, we are dealing with the formation of entire authoritarian bloc. I live in Kiev, and my native city, just today, was hit by Russian rockets and also Iranian drones. China helps Russia to avoid sanctions and to import technologies critical to warfare. North Korea sent to Russia more than 1 million artillery shells and deployed their troops to Russia. And Syria, before Assad regime was fallen, always voted for Russia in UN General Assembly. All these regimes, they have something in common. All these regimes which captured power in their own countries have the same idea what a human being is. They see people as object of control. They deny them in their rights and freedoms. Democracies, even not being ideal, see people, their rights and freedoms to be the highest value. And there is no way to negotiate it, because only existence of free world always provides a threat for dictatorship, that they will lose their power. And that is why, for Russia and for its authoritarian alliance, Ukraine is not just a goal. Ukraine is a tool how to break this international order and replace it with their own agenda. Freedom is not just about some norms in UN conventions and declarations. Freedom is something bigger. Without freedom, there is no love. We can see it on example of North Korean soldiers. The entire generations of people in North Korea were taught to love their dictators, but not their families, their communities. They can fulfill any misanthropic orders. They can sacrifice everything just for will of dictator. I read the memories of one defector of North Korea after the years and years of rehabilitation and living in Western society. He wrote how he gave up his own mother for torture and death without any doubt. Because when you have no space of freedom, you can't hear your heart, and the love ceases to exist. Third, unpunished evil grows. When you know the history, it's very difficult to remain idealist. The past century brought 2 devastating wars, colonial wars, a lot of deaths and destructions, and the total dehumanization of humankind, which reached its concrete form in Holocaust and Nazi concentration camps. Everything was changed after this period because UN system was created, international agreements were signed, and the responsibility for what has been perpetrated was codified in a slogan, never again. But while Nuremberg trial tried Nazi war criminals, Soviet Gulag was never condemned or punished. And that is why, when we have never again as a commemoration of the Second World War in Russia, every year people celebrate the end of the Second World War with a slogan, we can repeat. Unpunished evil grows. Russians repeat this horror again and again. Russian troops committed horrible crimes in Chechnya, in Moldova, in Georgia, in Mali, in Libya, in Syria, in other countries of the world. They have never been punished. They believe they can do whatever they want. Last year, my friend and colleagues, Russian human rights defenders from Memorial, published a report. They analyzed Russian tactics in Chechnya, in Syria, in Ukraine, and they got conclusion. This is the same war crime playbook. And they titled this report, The Chain of Wars, Chain of Crimes, Chain of Impunity. We must break this chain. The problem is that we still look to the world through the lens of the Nuremberg trial, when Nazi war criminals were tried only after Nazi regime had collapsed. But we are living in a new century. We must move further. Justice shouldn't be dependent on how and when the war will end. We have to create a special tribunal on aggression and hold Putin and top political leadership and high military command of the Russian state accountable. Because if we want to prevent wars in the future, we have to punish the states and the leaders who start such wars in present. Fourth, occupation is just another form of the war. People in Ukraine want peace much more than anyone else, but peace doesn't come when country which was invaded stop fighting. That's not peace, that's occupation. And occupation is horrible. It's just another form of the war. I know what I'm talking about because I'm documenting war crimes for 11 years. I know that people who live in occupation, they live in gray zone. They have no tools how to defend their rights, their freedom, their property, their lives, their children, their beloved ones. Russian occupation is not just changing one state flag to another. Russian occupation means enforced disappearances, torture, rape, denial of your own identity, religious persecution, forcible adoption of your own children, filtration camps, and mass graves. Months ago, Russians abducted the father Stepan Podolchak from the occupied part of Kherson region. They took Father Stepan Podolchak from his home, barefooted, with the bag over his head. And after 2 days, Russians told to his wife that Father Stepan Podolchak died. Russians tortured him to death only because he refused to transfer his church to the Russian church, which is under total control of Russian state. Father Stepan Podolchak told, I can't break my oath and my congregation. You can ask me why Russians killed Father Stepan Podolchak. Why Russians killed the children's writer Volodymyr Vakulenko? Why Russians killed the musician, conductor Yuri Kerpatenko? The answer is simple. Because they could. This is what's going on in occupation. And that's why, while we're all thinking about peace negotiation, let's be clear, we can't leave our people alone for torture and death under Russian occupation. It's our families, it's our relatives, it's our neighbors, it's our people. We have no moral right to do it. And last, ordinary people can create history. I mentioned on the beginning that I'm a human rights lawyer, and now I am in a situation when the law doesn't work. But based on my experience, I know that when you can't rely on legal instruments, when you can't rely on international treaties like Budapest Memorandum, when you can't rely on UN system of peace and security, you still can always rely on people. We get used to thinking in categories of states and interstate organizations, but ordinary people have a much greater impact than they can even imagine. Ordinary people can change the history. I would never wish anyone to go through our experience, because war probably is just the most horrible things which just can happen in a human life. But this dramatic time provides us an opportunity to express the best in us, to be courageous, to fight for freedom, to take a burden of responsibility, to make difficult but right choices, and to help each other. Because only when we help in each other, only when we resisting to evil, only when we risking our life for others whom we never met before, only in that moment we are acutely aware what does it mean to be human. And I'm here to say that despite everything, the story of Ukraine, it's a life-affirming story, because these dramatic times raise hope, because when freedom is denied, it becomes powerfully break out through the every concrete individuals. And I'm here to say that we still have a hope, because our future is unclear, but not pre-written. And we have a chance to fight for future, which we want for us and for our children. Because hope is not a confidence that everything will be fine, but hope is a deep understanding that all our efforts have a huge meaning. And I'm here to express my sincere gratitude to people in Germany for your solidarity, for your support, that you're with us, that we are not alone in this dramatic time of our history. Even from the human point of view, it's so important to know that we are not alone fighting with such enormous opposing power. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. We are fighting for something which have no limitation in national borders. Faith has no limitation in national borders. Love have no limitation in national borders. And freedom as well. And only spread of freedom make our world safer. Thank you very much.